Welcome, Chosen One. They didn't build that trap because they were stronger than you. They built it because they could feel something in you waking up, and they needed it to stop before it fully opened its eyes. Think about that for a second. The attack wasn't random. The timing was not coincidence. The way they came at you, with soft hands and careful words and perfectly timed concern, that was not kindness. That was architecture. They were building something around you, one small piece at a time, and they were counting on one thing, that you wouldn't see it until it was already closed. But you did. Not with a loud confrontation, not with screenshots or accusations. You saw it in the quiet. You felt the room change. You noticed when the warmth went a few degrees colder and nobody else seemed to catch it. And instead of saying something too soon, instead of naming what you couldn't yet prove, you waited. You watched. You let the pattern complete itself so there would be no question, no room left for them to say you imagined it. Stay with me. Because this video is not just about what they did. It's about what you became in the middle of it. And that part? That is the part they never planned for. Let's go back to the moment you first felt it. It wasn't dramatic. It almost never is. It was something small, a text that took longer than usual. And the reply, when it finally came, felt different. Not the words exactly, but the tone. Like someone had turned a dial half a degree in the wrong direction. You noticed. You filed it away. Then it happened again. An interaction where the care felt performed, where they asked how you were doing, but their eyes were already moving past you before you finished answering. You noticed that too. Then came the comments. You're always overthinking. You're too sensitive. Not everything is something, you know. And the worst one, the one delivered with the most gentleness, the most concern. I'm a little worried about you. You seem off. Said right in front of others. Said like an observation. Not a strike. But you felt the blade underneath it. They needed you to doubt yourself. That was the entire operation. Because a person who trusts their own perception is very hard to manipulate. So the goal was to get inside your head first, to make you question your instincts, to have you spend your energy defending your own sanity instead of watching what they were actually doing. And for a moment, be honest with yourself. It worked. There were nights you lay there, wondering if you were the problem, wondering if the patterns you were seeing were real, or if you had just gotten so used to pain that you were manufacturing reasons to expect more of it. That doubt, that specific, targeted doubt, that was the trap tightening. But something in you didn't let go. Even when you questioned the details, something underneath stayed steady. Something that said, the energy has changed. Even when you couldn't explain it, even when you had no proof to hand anyone, you knew. And that knowing, quiet, unshakable, stubborn in the way that only real things are stubborn, that is where everything begins. Here's the first thing I want you to hear. The sensitivity they mocked was not a flaw they almost managed to use against you. It was the exact thing that saved you. People who don't read energy miss things. They take the smile at face value. They hear the words and don't hear what's underneath them. They walk into situations that the more perceptive person would have read as dangerous 3 steps earlier. The person who has been told their whole life that they feel too much, that they notice too much, that they make things into something when it's nothing. That person has been carrying a gift that was constantly being reframed as a liability. What you have is not hypervigilance from unresolved hurt, though that may also be part of it. What you have is the ability to process people below the surface level. You pick up on micro shifts, on the specific silence after a specific sentence, on the way a laugh doesn't quite reach the eyes, on the lag between what someone says they're doing and the energy of what they're actually doing. That is not a malfunction. In every environment where information is being withheld or distorted, that ability is the only thing between you and the trap. It is, for lack of a better word, protection. They mistook it for weakness because in their model, feeling things means you can be moved, and being movable means you can be controlled. But they got the equation wrong, because feeling things deeply is not the same as being controlled by what you feel. You can sense the shift and not react to it. You can read the energy and hold your face still. You can know exactly what's happening and choose to keep watching, instead of announcing that you're watching. That is not sensitivity used against you. That is sensitivity used by you. And here is what you were actually doing during those months of silence. You were collecting. Not evidence in a dramatic sense, not screenshots in a folder. Something more internal. A running account of moments that didn't add up. The story that changed slightly the second time they told it. The invitation that came the day after you'd been built up, which felt less like warmth and more like setup. The way they introduced you to someone new with a description that framed you just a few degrees off. Not a lie exactly, just the version of you that made you smaller than you are. You noticed all of it, and you said nothing. Not because you were afraid, because you understood something, almost without thinking it through consciously, that if you raised it too early, they would flip it. They would make your awareness the story. They would call you suspicious, call you dramatic, find someone to agree with them, and suddenly the thing you had correctly perceived would become the evidence of your instability. You had probably seen that move before, in other rooms, with other people. You knew how it went, so you waited. And while you waited, the pattern became undeniable. Not just to you, it became so clear, eventually, that even the people who'd been brought into their version of the story started feeling the friction. Even the ones who had been positioned to doubt you started noticing things that didn't line up. You didn't expose them. They exposed themselves. You just stayed in the room long enough for it to happen. There is a kind of intelligence in that most people never develop. Most people react. Most people need to say what they know the moment they know it. The patience to watch a thing fully unfold while you are still inside it, while it is still affecting you, while part of you wants nothing more than to lay it all out and make someone else see what you see. That patience is earned. It does not come without practice, and in your case, the practice came hard. Let's talk about the trap itself, because there is something specific you need to understand about how it was built. It was not built for who you are now. It was built for who you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, The version of you that still operated out of a deep need to be believed. That version would have heard the whispers and panicked. That version would have rushed to explain, to defend, to get ahead of the narrative, to reach out and over-explain and probably say something that could be taken out of context. That version was running on fear of being misunderstood, because being misunderstood had cost them so much before. That version of you was real. That version of you survived things that would have broken plenty of people. And the people running this operation, they did their homework on that version. They knew the access points. They knew which wounds, when pressed, would produce a predictable reaction. What they didn't account for was that you had changed. Not in a way that announced itself, not in a way visible on the outside, but in the places where the wound used to be open. Something had grown over it. Not a scar that blocks feeling, but something more like a wall that redirects it. You still felt every bit of what they were doing. You just didn't respond the way they needed you to. The trap was perfectly designed. It just had the wrong target. They were aiming at a door that no longer existed, and all they hit was the wall you built where that door used to be. But here's the thing about the places they kept pressing. Those wounds they kept finding. Those old soft spots. The fear of abandonment. The need to be validated. The way you would sometimes take responsibility for other people's chaos just to keep the peace. Those were real. You carried them genuinely. They did not invent those vulnerabilities. And they are the reason you know what you know now. Because when something keeps getting pressed, you learn to feel the pressure before it lands. When the same kind of person keeps showing up with the same kind of energy, wearing a different face, you develop the ability to read the pattern before it fully plays out. Every time someone used your openness to get close and then weaponized what you showed them, that was painful. All of it was painful. But it was also training. Not training that anyone handed you. Not something you chose, but training in the way that fire shapes metal. You don't get a say in the process, but you do walk out different on the other side. The hurt became knowledge. The knowledge became discernment. The discernment is now what stands between you and every future attempt. They thought they were pressing on your weakness. They were actually pressing on the place where your armor is thickest now. Here is where things get interesting. Because the silence, your specific silence, the one they tried to frame as confusion, as guilt, as compliance, that silence was not neutral. It was working. When you refuse to give someone the reaction they are engineering, something happens to them. They don't stay steady. The control they thought they had starts to loosen because control depends on a loop. Action, reaction, interpretation of that reaction, action again. You broke the loop. You received the action and gave them nothing to interpret, and in that absence, something shifted. Their behavior became less careful. When they stopped getting the feedback they expected, they started overplaying. Small things got bigger. The precision that had been there at the start got sloppier. Stories started contradicting each other in small ways. The warmth, already thin, started wearing through in places. Because performance requires an audience that responds. Once you stopped responding the way they needed, they lost the calibration. And the people around you, they started picking it up too. Not because you said anything, but because in the presence of your stillness, the noise they were making became more audible. You did not expose them with your voice. You exposed them with your steadiness. That is something they had no defense against, because it required something they couldn't manufacture: genuine peace. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, something in you shifted so quietly you may not have noticed it happening. You stopped asking to be chosen. There was a time when the deepest thing you wanted from certain people was to be picked, to be trusted, to be included, to have someone look at you and say, "You matter. You're safe here. You're not too much." That longing is not shameful. It is ancient and human, and it came from real places. But in the season of the trap, while they were offering a version of that, here is care. Here is belonging. Here is the warmth you've been wanting. Something in you looked at it and felt nothing it used to feel. Not because you became cold, because you had started knowing the difference between real and performed. And the performed version couldn't land anymore, no matter how accurate the imitation. You stopped reaching for it, not in a dramatic exit, just quietly. The hand that used to extend went back to your side. And they felt it before you probably did. Because when someone stops needing what you've been pretending to offer, you lose everything you were using to keep them in place. This is what people mean when they talk about growing out of something. It's not a decision, it's a recognition. One morning, you wake up, and the thing that used to hollow you out with longing is just not there. And what's in its place is quieter and harder and so much more yours. Now let me say something about the timing, about all the things that seemed like they were taking too long. There were doors you tried that didn't open, connections that almost became something and then didn't. Situations you thought were finally it, the thing that was supposed to happen, and then they just fell away. You have probably wondered about that, whether you were being held back or passed over, or whether there was something in you that kept things from coming together. Consider a different reading. Consider that some of those doors stayed closed because what was behind them was not safe for who you were at that time. Consider that the delay was not punishment or oversight, but something more like protection. That you were being kept outside a room where you would have entered, still carrying the wounds that made you predictable, still operating from the hunger that made you manipulable, still moving from the version of yourself that the trap was built for. There is a kind of mercy in a door that doesn't open yet. You can only see it from this side of what you've been through. From inside it, it felt like rejection. But rejection and redirection feel almost identical when you're in the middle of them. The difference only shows up later when you look back and realize what you were protected from. The weight was not empty. The weight was the whole thing. And what came out of the weight? This. You learn to read people in a new way. Not from suspicion, not from bracing for the next attack, but from the accumulation of so many honest observations that you develop something close to fluency. You can sit across from someone now and feel whether the energy is consistent, or whether the surface and the underneath are running on different tracks. You don't announce this. You don't use it to perform discernment for people. You just know. And you act from what you know. And you don't explain yourself when you do. This is the thing that manipulative people cannot handle. Manipulation depends on the gap between what you can prove and what you actually know. As long as that gap exists, they can operate inside it, deny, reframe, redirect, make you look like the unstable one for suspecting what you correctly suspect. But when someone closes that gap, not by accusing, but by simply not being accessible to the play, the whole operation breaks down. You are no longer accessible to the play. You don't take the bait. You don't rush to fill uncomfortable silences. You don't over-explain your way out of situations that were designed to need over-explanation. You move like someone who is watching, and that alone makes you a completely different kind of target than you used to be, meaning no longer a target at all. And then this, the last layer. The people who could not see you for what you were, who tried to make you a story that suited them, a character that stayed in its lane, a reaction machine they could wind up when they needed drama and quiet down when they needed compliance. Those people are not just enemies. They are, in a strange and uncomfortable way, among the clearest teachers you've ever had. Because every trap they built showed you something they never meant to reveal. Not about you, about them. About the way they operate when they need to control someone. About the exact techniques they use, the sequence, the language, the type of person they recruit to add credibility to their version. You watched all of it from the inside. You took a full course in that particular kind of manipulation, and you will never pay that tuition again. Not just with them, with anyone who tries something similar. The pattern recognition you built in that season, it transfers. The next person who starts warming up that same engine will feel you pull back before the first move is even complete. And they won't be able to name why. They'll just feel it. The door that used to open for this kind of approach will not open, and you will walk away clean before anything gets complicated. That is not damage. That is calibration. There is a difference. Now step back from the specific people, the specific situation, and hear this. There are seasons in life that do not make sense from the inside. You are too close to the heat of them. All you can feel is the burning. And the mind, trying to make meaning, keeps asking the wrong question. Why is this happening to me? As if suffering were a punishment to be traced back to a cause, a mistake to be corrected, a sentence to be served. But what if the question isn't, why is this happening to me? What if the question is, what am I becoming while this is happening? Because the person who came out of that trap, they are not who went in. And I don't mean that in the polished way, the way that sounds like a redemption arc with clean edges. I mean something messier and more real. You are carrying things now that are yours in a way that nothing given to you ever could be. You didn't receive your discernment from a teacher or a book or a season of ease. You built it in a room where the walls were closing in. And that means no one can take it from you. It is stitched into the way you process the world. What was set against you became what made you undoable. That is not an accident. That is the pattern of how strength actually forms. Not from protection. From contact with the thing that had to be survived. Maybe what you called betrayal was the last exam in a course you'd been taking for years. Maybe what you called abandonment was actually separation. Being pulled out of a room before the ceiling came down. Maybe what you called loneliness was the specific quiet that comes when you have finally stopped performing for people who were never truly safe. And your nervous system is finally allowed to rest. You are not who you were when this started. And the people running the operation, they are still running the same version of it, on someone else now. But you know how it goes. You've seen the whole architecture, and you stepped out before the door could close. So this is where I leave you. Not with a speech about what's coming next, because that is yours to discover, but with this. You do not owe anyone an explanation for what you chose not to react to. You do not owe anyone proof that your instincts were right. The fact that you are standing here, unbowed, unbroken, still carrying your own name without someone else's narrative written across it, that is the proof. You are the evidence. In the chapter opening now, it's not the same as anything behind you, because you are walking into it as someone who has been shown, in the most specific and personal way, that your perception can be trusted. That the quiet voice that said something is wrong was not anxiety, not trauma on a loop, not you making problems out of nothing. It was accurate. It was early. It was right. Walk into what's next knowing that. If this video put words to something you've been carrying in silence, subscribe and stay close. This space is for the ones who sense things before they can explain them, who watch longer than most people are comfortable watching, who have paid the price of that particular kind of awareness. You belong here. Drop "I see it now" in the comments if this confirmed something you've been holding. Let someone else who is still questioning their instincts see that they are not alone in this. Like if you are ready to stop apologizing for seeing clearly. And if you know someone who is in the middle of being told they are imagining it, share this with them. Not to convince anyone, just to remind them that what they feel has weight. You were never the problem. You were always the one they couldn't quite get to hold still. Go. You know what's next. God bless you, chosen one. Walk in what you know.